Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this video is just to clarify something I see very regularly as an instructor that oftentimes is a hang up for people who are new to programming. And this is just sort of the idea of a function and its return value. So I'm just going to focus on that. So I'm going to use sort of the more semantic version of writing functions in JavaScript. That's using the function keyword. Okay. So let's just first reiterate how you write a function in JavaScript. So all a function is just a thing we give a name. So just say, we'll call this function 1. Okay. And then this function, inside the curly brackets, I'm able to give it directions. In this case, all I want this function to do is console.log the number 1. That's all it's going to do. But again, logging is just literally the act of printing onto the screen. So if I were to use this function, so now that I've defined this function, so it's defined, I said, hey, I'm going to create a function called 1. This is what this function called 1 does. I can now use the function as many times as I want. So if I can go 1, 1, 1, and again in JavaScript you have to use the parentheses to use the function. Okay, because without the parentheses, I'm only referring to the function as a value, in the sense that this function is a thing that exists and it's stored in this variable called 1. But to use the one way to think about it is think of it like a recipe. So the word 1 is the recipe. I've stored this recipe in the variable 1. But I want to cook this recipe, so then I use the parentheses to actually cook it, to actually use the thing. So now if I run this code, node scratch.js, see, I get 1 3 times. Okay? But what is the function's value? Okay? What is the value of this function 1? Well, let's see here. So let's create a variable const result and see what happens if we say 1 plus 1. Okay? And see if we add the values and then we console.log the result of adding the function, the two instances of the function together. Okay, and I get not a number. Okay, not a number. Since I've used the function 2 more times, each time I use the function, I still logged 1 more time. So I ended up logging 1 5 times. But the result of adding 1 and 1 is not a number because technically the function has no value. There is no value to this function currently. Right now, the function is just a set of instructions. And when I call the function, it's executing that set of instructions. But a function can have a value. It can be worth something. And every function in JavaScript can only be worth one thing, and that thing is called the return value. So if I were to change this to, instead of console log 1, I'm just going to return 1. Basically what I'm saying is that the value of this function is 1. Okay? Now watch what happens. And just to show you that the function ran, we'll just console.log the function ran. Every time the function gets called, it'll still console log the function ran because that's a direction I'm giving it. But see, the function, when I do the result, it's 2 because technically what did 1 return? 1. So the value of this function is 1 plus calling the same function again is going to return 1 again. So 1 plus 1 is 2, and that's how I get the console log 2. So the result of this expression, so essentially what it does is first it executes this function, sees that the function has a return value. So then what I'm really doing is I'm adding the return value of these two functions. Before, when it did not have a return value, the functions just were not a number. I don't know what this is. Cool. So now we know that the return value, one way to think about it, it is the value of the function. If I were to invoke the function, it's the result. It's the end. It's the thing that the functions was worth. It might have done other things. So again, every time I ran the function, it console log the function ran, but that's not the value of the function. The return value is the value of the function. So when I added the function to itself, it gave me back 2 because the value of the function is 1. Okay? So hopefully that's starting to get a little bit clearer. So in that case, but this is not the most exciting thing. Why would I want a function that is just worth 1? Okay? So let's make this a little bit more interesting. Let's make this function add 1. And we'll say that this function takes in one argument. That's a number, so we'll just call it num. Okay, so now what this function returns is num plus 1. So whatever number I give it, it's going to add 1 to it, and that's going to be the return value. So now if I say 1 and 2, well, let's see here. In this situation, I'm passing in 1 as an argument. That argument ends up taking the place of the num variable in the function definition. It's kind of like, imagine that there's variables in a recipe and saying, okay, well, here's the bowl you have. So now I know when I bake the recipe, I'm using the bowl that I have. In this case, this is that thing. Okay, so 1 becomes num, so really it's going to be 1 plus 1. So this function is returning, in this situation, in this context, it's returning 1 plus 1. So the value of this function is 2. Okay, and in this instance, this invocation of the function, num will be 2. So it's returning 2 plus 1. So the value of this function is 3. So essentially, the end result of this is really the same thing as me saying 2 plus 3. Okay, so 2 plus 3 should be 5. So if this all works, results should be 5. So all I should see when I run this program is 5, because it's gonna, all I'm logging. So even though this function has a value, I never see it because I never logged it. That's the difference. Things can have a value, but it doesn't mean you see them. That's the function of the log function. The log function allows us to print values to the screen, but doesn't mean anytime there is a value, we see it on the screen. So in this case, the only thing I'm logging is the result variable. So I do node scratch.js. Oh, made some sort of syntax error. Oh, yeah, that's right. It's not called 1 anymore. It's called add 1. Add 1. So let's run the function. And there we go, 5. And so we see the function ran twice because we got the 2 logs that are right here. The function ran. But we don't see that this is worth 2 and then this is worth 3. We don't see the return value, but we can use the return value. We are able to manipulate and play with the return value. And that's how we got the value of 5. Okay, so hopefully that makes the difference between sort of a function's return value versus the result of just doing random logs in a function a little bit clearer. And also the fact that, you know, a function doesn't have to return a value. Okay, you just have to think about the context of what the function is doing. If you're just going to do some stuff in the function and you're not necessarily needing some sort of value to work with after the fact, then you don't need a return value. But if I wanted to get back a number, if I wanted to get back this result and I wanted to use it for like mathematical computation, then yes, the function had to return the value so that way I can do stuff like this. Because again, the value of the function, when I place the function in an expression like this, the value of this is the return value. And if you think about it that way, whenever I see a function, I'm just thinking, okay, well, that is the same thing as me writing its return value in that spot in the code. It becomes a lot easier to think through what's happening in your code. So I'll leave it at that. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Do like the video, subscribe to the channel, head over to devnursery.com and join the Slack and Discord community. And I will see you guys in the next one. Ciao.